Ken, it's 2025. We spend a lot of time online. We're scrolling, we're reading things, we're watching things. I got to ask, man, how's your BS detector these days? You feel like you can spot it pretty easy these days, or is it getting harder?
Y- You know what? I would say in some ways it's getting really easy, and then there every once in a while it's starting to get harder. Like sometimes in video, it happens where I'm like, was that AI or was that real?
Yeah, the AI for the video side for sure is getting harder to tell. It's fooling me where it's like the front half is one thing, you're like, "Oh, this is a real video," and then it turns into something so crazy that you're like, "Oh, that was AI."
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of like even LinkedIn text posts. Is it something that you can tell where people are actually real or fake? Do you find you trust what you see, or are you applying a lot of skepticism to what you see out there?
I am applying a lot of skepticism, assuming most people are using AI to write their posts and it's not them.
Mm. And I think that's how it's going for a lot of us these days. I think if you're listening to this and you're into marketing or you're trying to grow your business, I think we all have a very skeptical hat. I find I'm really skeptical because I read all the books on manipulation and propaganda. I'm a good marketer. I read the dark side as well as the light side, right? And we're not alone. I feel like a lot of us are skeptical. We see testimonials on pages, and sometimes we're like, we see people say world's best, award-winning creator, author, and you're like, by who? Your local chamber of commerce? It's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I think we all have this filter going on, and I think that's why this is an important conversation because when everybody out there, especially on LinkedIn and B2B spaces, but people selling with their expertise are making claims about their authority, we're in a different time. And then AI is in the mix, making it even harder to discern who's real and who's not. So, welcome back to the AI Driven Marketer. I'm Dan Sanchez, and I'm joined by my co-host Ken Frere.
Hey, what's up, bro?
And we're continuing on in the series for Own the Show, the Pod to Book series, where we're talking about how to become an authority in the age of AI. Today, we're talking about this problem of like, what do you do when everybody positions themselves as an authority? We certainly have talked about the importance of becoming an authority and how anybody can essentially become that two-word phrase that everybody cringes at, a thought leader. Shh, that thing we all cringe at, but all secretly want at the same time because we want to lead the thinking of others. But it's kind of hard. Like everyone's positioning themselves as an expert, and we're all giving hot takes and pushing our thoughts and opinions in an authoritative way on social media. And I find that it's hard, it makes it hard to stand out. You pump out stuff, and it seems like it just falls flat. And that's the problem I want to address. And I had this counterintuitive idea a couple of years ago that I found worked really well for me that I want to share today. But it is weird. It's counterintuitive. The Ken, even the first time I brought it up to you, where you're like, yeah, but why would you want to do this
Oh yeah, I
if
remember.
you're an expert? And this, the summary of the idea is to become a student. You're like, well, cool, that works if you're in the beginning. Like you're a professional going to expert before you can become a contributor, before you can become an authority, which is the outline we talked about in the last episode. But how does becoming a student help you if you're already kind of like you're already an expert contributor and you're maybe kind of becoming an authority, but you want to do more? How does that become a thing? And I think that's the counterintuitive part because I think we all should do it. Whether you're at the very, very beginning, like you're actually a student in college, or you're on the brink of becoming an authority, but you know you're not quite an authority yet. This
Yeah.
is like I want to call it a hack, but it's like the best path that I've found to actually becoming an authority in the sea of everyone trying to become an authority. Like this one actually works.
Yeah. And I think the reason why it's so counterintuitive is because when we think of student, we think, oh, we got to go back to high school. We're reading books. We're taking papers. Oh, college, a drag. And they forget the positive parts of being a student. And that's the thing that I think you're ultimately trying to get at is that why it's so counterintuitive is because when you take the positive aspects of being a student it could accelerate your thought leadership. So Dan, walk us through like why being a student and what are those aspects to it?
So let's talk about what it is first.
Yeah.
Like, I did this because I was forced to do it because I was coming in as a marketer with a lot to know about marketing, and I figured it out on accident. I was working for Sweetfish, B2B marketing, and there were some B2B marketing concepts I didn't know anything about. I just knew nothing about them. So I had to be the student. I couldn't pretend to be an authority on things like account-based marketing. I didn't know anything. So I was like, okay, but I want to do a series on account-based marketing, but I can't because I don't know anything about it. But I'm like, but how do you talk about something you don't know anything about? And I'm like, well, then I just be honest about what it means. I just be honest about not knowing anything. So I did. We did a whole 30-day podcast series every single day for 30 days. It was a lot of work. And it's kind of like what we're doing here, but I had a whole team helping me producing and editing. And now AI does a lot of this work. But I did it all. And I bought like a whole bunch of books, probably like 10 different books on account based marketing, all the books, which is all the books written on the topic. I scheduled interviews with some of the best speakers on the topic, and we had multiple interviews. I reviewed a book, an episode. And then at the beginning of the week, I would say, hey, this is what I'm learning. At the end of the week, I'd be like, hey, this is what we did. Here's what I learned. And then something really funny happened, Ken. By the end of that, people were asking me questions. I was like, what the
Hmm.
heck? Like, I've been seriously saying, like, I'm just figuring this out. I'm a B2C marketer coming to B2B. I don't know crap. But then people started asking me for advice on account based marketing. I'm like, what is happening? Like, why are they asking me to this? And ever since then, I'm like, something happened there. And multiple times now, I've rolled up my sleeves and have run this same process. And I find that it works over and over and over again. And it's even happening now with this very podcast. I didn't know a lot about AI, but I just became a student, assumed nothing, and told people I didn't know nothing, and then just started sharing what I learned. And all of a sudden, like I don't call myself this. Again, you never call yourself the expert, the authority. It's like, but people ask me to speak and come to virtual conferences, get up on real stages, and ask me for quotes in their books they're writing on the topic. And I'm like, I guess people like what they're hearing. Even though I've not pretended to be an authority, I'm just a student on the journey to master AI the whole time.
Yeah.
So there's something about it that is counterintuitive, yet is the best way to actually becoming an authority. I'm convinced. And I think there's a few different dynamics at play.
Yeah. Well, one dynamic I think is at play is that when you're a student, you're really hungry to learn and you're like a self-starter, right? Like you're kind of like, I'm going to pave the way for people because a lot of people just don't know where to start. I'm curious what your take on that is.
I think you're right. I think oftentimes one of the reasons why we distrust anybody who calls themselves an expert is because they're actually not,
Yeah.
right? They're not an expert, and sometimes it's easy to tell. Sometimes they're good at gaslighting and making it seem like they are. But if you start as a student, then it forces you to do the work of actually becoming a real expert. Like if you humble yourself and go low, then you're actually doing the work. Everything you're doing, like I did with account based marketing, I was reading all the books. So I was going beyond the basics and finding all the little nuggets that were hidden in the rarer books. There was actually a few books on the topic that I was like, I never would have read this book before, but it was actually really good. And I learned a lot from this one particular obscure book that nobody recommends. And then I would take those ideas and then talk to people who really knew what they were talking about and really wrestle with it. And then I would go and it would force me to reflect on what I had learned by doing solo episodes, sharing it. So it was actually like the same kind of process that a student might do in college, right? You read the books and then you talk to your professor. Hopefully, if you're good, you go and talk to them after class to really, what do we call that? Socratic learning, right? When you're actually
Yep.
having dialogue about it. And then you're synthesizing your learning by forcing yourself to write it on as papers. That's traditionally how we learned in college. And I just kind of changed the model by I still had to read all the books, but then I had podcast episodes about it. And then I did solo episodes synthesizing what I'd learned about it. And you become the master through teaching. Teaching's like the final capstone step of really mastering the material other than executing it yourself. That's the one step I didn't take, but I could have started doing it, would have really taken it to the next level.
Yeah.
So I think that is a major component of it that actually makes it real when most people don't.
Yeah. And it's fascinating. And this literally, if you think we're making this stuff up, that people always act like they're the expert, this happened to me yesterday. Someone sends me a LinkedIn, cold pitch, and I look at them, I look at all of them, and I'm like, ooh, and it was intriguing enough that I went and I actually clicked on the person's profile and I started reading some of his posts. And one of the posts caught my eye. It said, act like you're the expert, even if you're not. And immediately I just thought to myself, I can't trust you. I can't trust that you're actually going to give me an offer because you might just be a student right now in this process and you're trying to build clients, which I get it. I get if you're trying to get clients and you're trying to close deals. Man, I'm all about that. But I want you to do it in an ethical way. Don't act like you're the expert. Just tell me like, hey, I'm new at this, or hey, I'm a few steps ahead, or at least tell me the truth of, hey, I used to manage all these other things before, and this is how I'm now going out on my own doing it for people. I get it. I understand that. Like, I'd rather you tell me the truth than you lie to me and act like you're the expert. And instantly, I'm like, okay, I didn't accept the person's request. I didn't acknowledge it, and I just moved on. But that's why I find what you're telling me and others fascinating, because when you are the student and you're forcing yourself to learn, people will quickly be able to tell I'm an expert, or you're an expert, or you're not an expert. And you're actually learning what you're talking about.
Now, there's an even more counterintuitive part because it makes sense. You're like, okay, yeah, like if you're starting from the beginning, do the work, become the expert, and therefore you can start to grow in authority. But here's the real weird twist on it. I would recommend taking this path even if you already are the expert and you've already read all the books. Here's why. When everyone's positioning themselves in authority as an expert, again, skepticism's really high. Distrust really high. If you position yourself not as an expert, but as a student down at the bottom, their distrust meter goes down. And that's the most important part. Is they're going to trust you, they're going to trust your content more because you're not making any presumptions. So they don't have to they don't have to like squint their eyes and be like, yeah, but where's the fine print? Do I really trust these major claims they're saying? Do I really trust that they're an expert? There's nothing to really pick apart because it's not hard to believe that you're just a student. That's a much easier thing to believe. But they're starting to pay attention to you.
Yeah.
And if they're paying attention to you, because again, they're trusting what you're putting down, you're just sharing helpful things that you're learning and just passing it along to them. All of a sudden, they're learning from you. And what happens when someone learns from you? Well, they start to trust you. And authority really isn't a game of, it is a game of perceived credibility, but that perceived credibility is summarized in the word trust. And if you continue to be helpful and trust people and they're learning from you and you're sharing real insights, then they're going to know that you actually know the game. And something happens where it becomes like I don't know, like a parasocial apprenticeship. And that's kind of like a loaded term, but it's like socially, they're learning through you. You become the teacher, even though you're positioning yourself as a student. And then over time, you become the authority when enough people are learning from you. And you, again, the cool thing is you never actually have to make a shift from student to authority. The shift will happen by itself because other people start calling you the authority. So you never actually have to take the humble hat off. You could just leave that sucker on indefinitely.
Yeah.
But other people will keep putting the authority hat on you. And it's great. I love it because, like, you don't have to ever pretend. You could just continue being the student and being curious and learning and sharing what you're learning. And if you do it well and you do it authentically, other people will put the authority hat on you and
Yeah.
you'll actually grow in real authority. And I think that's why it works so well. It's because it's not presuming to be up here. You're letting other people pull you up. You just continually shoot low, do the hard work, and try to be as helpful as possible, and you'll grow in the authority.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the unlock of why I would, even if you're an expert, like just pretend you're a student and just start from the beginning. And I promise if you do that over 6 months, you will have more authority at the end.
Yeah.
And there's never a switch pivot you have to make back to being a quote unquote expert.
Yeah. I think a great person that you and I both know, and I worked for him, was Michael Hyatt.
Yeah.
Right. He's time and time again over his career pivoted to different industry. I wouldn't say industries, but niches, right? But he's taken that approach of a student. And even now, if you follow Michael Hyatt, which I would encourage you guys to follow Michael Hyatt, he's a fantastic leader. He's jumping into AI and he's posting a
Doing it
lot about
again.
AI
He's
now.
starting all over again.
He's starting all over.
I love
But
that
here's the
guy.
fascinating thing, because I started working with, I was working under, at Full Focus when he's just first started learning about AI, and his ferocious hunger to like just think through all the processes. And he wasn't talking about it online yet. He was just talking to about it on staff, teaching other people, learning. And now he's out there like, hey, here's what I'm learning. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I see out there. And he's bringing so much new thoughts to it, and it's within his niche, right? He's doing it that I'm like, it's so much fun to watch him, knowing all the stuff that I've known about him for the last 10, 15 years.
I
Right.
remember listening to his podcast back when it was like, I can't remember it. Actually, I can't remember what the podcast was. It was like Focus on This. No, it wasn't that. That was the new one that you were co-hosting.
Yeah.
It was like, This Is Your Life or something like that. I can't remember now. His early podcast, he would just talk about things. He would just be like, hey, I'm learning this. And then what I found is this. And he just shared, like, he's a guy who was the CEO of Thomas Nelson, the book publisher, big publisher, and then had a wildly successful blog. And he's still talking about, like, oh, I'm diving into this new topic. Then eventually he writes, like, he starts as a student, but eventually he writes a book about it. He launches a course about it. But it always started like in this, like, I'm just learning. And he'd interview people and then he'd share what he's learned and he'd share like the steps that are helpful for him. And every time I'm like, man, this guy's really good at learning and then breaking it down and making it simple for me to learn. And over time, I've just learned to trust him on so many topics because he stays humble, learns, and then just teaches what he learns over and over and over again. Even though for all the things he's done, like he could say he's a thought leader and nobody would bat an eye and they'd be like, yep,
Oh, for sure.
he is.
Yeah. So Dan, a couple of things as someone is thinking here, hey, I want to be a student. We're talking about why they should be a student. We've kind of touched on how to be a student, be hungry, be humble, right? Be curious is a couple of things that I heard. Anything else that you may say it feels counterintuitive, but is pivotal for people becoming a student to actually then becoming an expert?
That is a topic for the next two chapters. And we actually break it down. I actually have a very specific guide to do it. I call it the 30-30-30 plan. It sounds crazy, but I promise it's a fantastic plan to follow. I also talk about a different concept called learning in the light, which makes it really easy for people to break down in practical steps what it looks like to be a student, but in public and social media where everybody can see it. Because some of us forget what being a student's like, especially if you're already an expert. You're just used to saying this or that rather than leading with curiosity, leading with experimentation, documenting your journey rather than just telling people how it is. And that's the part that I'm looking forward to dive into. But I thought it was important just to dive into the positioning itself of becoming a student when everybody else is positioning themselves as an authority.